Hey guys, it's your boy, Ballface 8020, back again with another great commentary. Been a while since we've done an economics, so let's do a rehash. I made a video way back, in the early aftermath stages of the pandemic, saying big inflation is not coming. I was proven to be incorrect about that. However, if you actually watch the video and the videos I made, the subsequent videos I made talking about inflation, a lot of what I said was borne out. It's just that, I did think that there would be inflation. I was actually making, I think, the time that I said there wouldn't be big inflation, I was saying the inflation rate for 2021 will be around 3.5%. I think I said either 3% or 3.5%, which is what was on the higher side of what anybody was predicting. It turned out to be way more than that, and it turned out to continue for longer than that. Inflation was, I think, over 8% in 21. It was 6 or 7 somewhere in 22. 23, it hasn't been as bad, but I'm not sure exactly where it is. It has started to slow down a little bit, and now you're starting to see the collapse in the oil prices. There are things that I said then that I would not have said today. Basically, what my thesis was that, and this I do stand by, is that in our system, basically, what causes prices to go up for the most part? It's the increase in the supply of money beyond, at a disproportionate rate to the increase of, goods and services or actual wealth that's available. And I said that in our system, you don't need to look, if you want to look at the supply of money, you don't need to look at any data point aside from total credit outstanding. And I still stand by that. And so what I said is, since the growth of credit has normalized, or mostly normalized, in the immediate pandemic aftermath, we shouldn't expect large-scale inflation. But then a couple of different things happened. First of all, the credit denormalized. It started getting, you did see additional surges of credit creation. And so, of course, you'd expect inflation from that. The other thing is that I underestimated the impact that the fact that the credit, the big credit increases in 2020 happened at the same time as a massive contraction in the overall economy. So you should have seen massive inflation then, and you didn't, because demand was so suppressed, due to the lockdowns. So it made sense that eventually you would see that inflation that should have shown up in 2020 manifest later. So that's one thing that should have happened that I didn't take into account. I guess I was a little bit fooled by the sort of wisdom or ill wisdom of crowds that, I was wrongly influenced there. The other is that you did see brief periods here and there where credit creation would spike up again. So that's more money supply, so more inflation. The other is that the dollar in any fiat currency has no inherent value. That's why it's a fiat currency. When we talk about money, the only forms of money with inherent value are gold and silver. And I've been skeptical about this in the past, but it's just factually true. So since the dollar is pure fiat, it has no inherent value, even without the increase in the money supply, there was an increase in the money supply, but even the dollar itself can lose value because it has no inherent value in the first place. So there's nothing stopping. So even if you don't increase the supply of dollars, you could still have its purchasing power decline, just because people, because its value is made up to begin with. And I didn't take that into account. And so that's why a lot of my immediate inflation predictions were not borne out. But I think that a lot of the stuff I said was. Furthermore, it's very noticeable that now that the rate of consumer price inflation has dramatically declined. Yes, prices are still going up, but not nearly the way they were before. It used to be like I felt like prices for everything were just getting higher all the time. Certainly being in the insurance industry, we do still see a lot of it, but it's nothing like it was, a year ago. And even a year ago, it wasn't quite as bad as it had been, 6 months before that. So it took longer. It was bigger than I thought it would be, and it took longer for it to get a hold of, but I was kind of borne out. We could have a situation, though, where, like, at this moment, it seems like credit is growing, it looks like, at a rate of, last time I checked, over the last 6 months, total credit has grown by like 2.5%, whereas pre-pandemic it was growing at like 4.5%. So you would still expect inflation, but not necessarily that much. Plus, you can't just look at just the credit growth, because if credit is growing at 2.5% or whatever, and the real GDP is growing at 2.5% forever, then you wouldn't really expect prices to rise, because, at least not overall, because the increase in supply shouldn't be doing anything other than keeping up with the increase of the amounts of goods and services in the economy. I'm not trying to spur out too hard on you, but what I'm trying to say is, and this is like where my limited IQ and vocabulary really makes it difficult to explain, but what I'm trying to say is that, let's say you're in some economy, a really small economy, that just has 10 pieces of gold circling around. People are just trading these 10 pieces of gold back and forth to get whatever they want. And you have, a loaf of bread can be purchased with one piece of gold. And these must be very small pieces of gold. So you have a situation then where suddenly some additional gold gets discovered, and now instead of 10 pieces of gold in the economy, there's 20 pieces of gold. So since there's the same amount of goods and services, that bread should no longer cost one piece of gold, it should cost 2 pieces of gold. But if at the same time somebody makes a discovery which allows them to drastically increase the bread production, and now 2 times the amount of bread are produced, then while everything else stays equal in the economy, then because the supply of bread is greater, or it only costs half as much in real terms to make that bread still only costs 1 piece of gold. I know that I explained that awfully. Hopefully you could at least sort of follow it. So that's where, I think we are with the inflation at the time being. Inflation is low right now. I don't know. I really can't predict the immediate future with inflation. It could be hyperinflation. We could have Japanese style deflation. It's really not clear, because we've had pure fiat currency since 1973. And that's not just the United States, that's the entire world, because all the other world's currencies are based on the dollar. And before 1973, the dollar was nominally backed by gold. Not really, but it was at least supposedly backed by gold. So we haven't had a 100% pure fiat currency has only existed since, well, technically 1973, really 1971. So what's that, 53 years now. You would expect, around the 50-year mark, you would expect that system to collapse. And if it collapses, then you've got hyperinflation. So I'm going to stay away from predictions like that, because I just don't know where we're going with the dollar. That's all I'm going to say about inflation for the time being. I'm in pure wait and see mode. Now, when you talk about just the general macroeconomic picture of the U.S., that's where I think we can be a little bit more concrete. In the late part of 2022, I made a economics video saying that the recession would finally begin in May of 2023. Before that, I had made some other premature recession calls. We did not have a recession in 2021 or 2022. We did have a few slow patches in 2022, or a slow patch in 2022. But what I said in that video where I predicted a recession in May of 2023 is I said, if you look at all the data points together, if you look at basically these 5 leading indicators, which are the Fed leading indicator index, the Philly Fed survey, the copper to gold ratio, the housing, like where we were with the housing market, and the global credit impulse. If you looked at all 5 of those indicators together, they all indicated that a recession would begin in between March and October of 2023. So most of the indicators seem to indicate that the recession would start around March. I had a feeling that things would take a bit longer than that. So I just kind of decided to split the difference and say May. That's obviously turned out not to be true. There was some times in there where it looked like it might happen, but it just didn't. I should never have made that May call. I should have known that how things were going, like things were going, this cycle is taking so long, and I should have gone, the strongest and the most important of all those indicators was housing, which was saying recession in either September or October. So I should never have made that May call. The earliest I should have called was for September. And even then there should have been like September, October, maybe even later. There's no... It is possible that recession began in October. I don't think that is the case. Recessions in the United States, at least, get dated after the fact. And right now, everything looks like it's already recessionary. Like, not leading to recession is actually recessionary. Everything looks like it's already recessionary except for unemployment, GDP, and I forget the other one. I'm sorry. So you might think, well, okay, unemployment, I mean, that's a recession without unemployment and declining GDP. How is that a recession? That's not much of a recession at all. It's like, well, you got to look at the whole picture. Let's talk about GDP first. Right now, there's no question that GDP is not recessionary. However, there is and has been for a while a huge divergence between GDP and GDI, and GDI is being gross domestic income. Historically, when there has been these things are supposed to basically match. They're supposed to be the same. They're supposed to match. When there's a wide divergence in them, as there has been for like a year now, historically it has tended to be GDI that was correct, and the GDP was missing it. And this would be congruent with the fact that things just feel recessionary, and that there has been, a decline in real wages for a while. Now, I think that may have recently reversed, at least technically. I don't believe that in actuality real wages have started to rise. I think they maybe have stopped declining. But, I mean, you can just ask yourself, does your paycheck get you as far as it did 2 years ago? And I think most people are going to say no. In my case, the answer is no, definitely no. Nominally, I'm not even making any more money than I'm actually making a little less. But nominally, you're probably making more money. But in real terms, does the money you're making, is it getting you as far as it did 2 years ago? The answer, I think, for most people is no. The statistics bear that out, although, again, there are signs it's starting to reverse. So when you look at GDI and real wages, that's when like things are looking kind of recessionary now. I don't know if it looks any worse now than it did a few months ago, so I wouldn't say suddenly, but you can understand why there would be that sort of false alarm. I'm still willing to say that, I mean, if we entered a recession already, the earliest it was October. I don't know if we did or not. I don't know if, like, I wouldn't be shocked if the BLS ultimately ends up backdating the beginning of this recession to December, that we're already in the recession now. We already entered it last month. I think that's very possible. Not certain about that. The other thing, and I don't know if this ties into employment or not, if this was the other thing I was going to mention, was there's the very low initial claims for unemployment. And generally you see that rise before a recession. In fact, you would still get over the initial claims in early summer of last year, got to over 250,000 per week, and which is such a dramatic rise from the bottom, which was a little bit below 200,000, that you were definitely thinking, like, you could easily be thinking, like, okay, we're either in a recession now or we're going to be one in the next couple of months, which would have been consistent with the call I made in 2022. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen. I really thought everything was good, shit was going to hit the fan in October, and it didn't happen. Instead, we got another hurrah. Now, I'm confident it's the last hurrah. Oh, now I remember the three things. The three things that don't look recessionary are unemployment, GDP, and the stock market. So, and I think that most people would, like I said, most people would say that's pretty ridiculous. Like, well, if it's a recession, except for GDP, the stock market, and unemployment, then you're talking semantics. Who cares if that's not much of a recession? Those are the only things we care about. I've always stayed away from making predictions about the stock market because I think it's such like a casino. I don't understand like how it works, like why it goes up, why it goes down, who knows. So I'm not really going to get into too much with the stock market. I was never really a huge concern of mine. I do think it will crash majorly this year, probably in the fall. I think in September or October of this year, there's going to be an enormous stock market crash. But maybe not. I'm certainly not certain of it. When it comes to the recession call, though, I'm not any less certain about it. I know that there's going to be a recession. Like, yes, I was wrong about the timing several times. I do think it's possible to start begin as early as December. Again, you can look at GDI. And then what's the deal with unemployment? Well, the unemployment has been very stubborn. I do feel like, based on my own anecdotal experience, if you guys want to share in the comments if you're seeing as many like now hiring signs as you did, because I feel like I feel like I pretty much don't see the now hiring signs anymore, whereas they were all over for years. What it looks like if you look at the data is it appears to be the case that businesses aren't hiring, but they're not firing either. And that's why you haven't seen the collapse in employment yet. Because until you actually have like layoffs, and now you are starting to see a slight trend upwards in unemployment simply because we aren't hiring as many people. But it's an uneven thing. It's only going up a little bit from a very low base, and like I said, you don't see the mass layoffs. And historically in America, there hasn't been, if there's been a recession, every recession has included mass layoffs, and that just isn't happening here. Now, you can have recessions without mass layoffs. Japan has had like 8 since 1990, but we're in a situation where it is kind of like it is in Japan, where there aren't mass layoffs because companies are hoarding labor. And they're able to do it because real wages are declining. They don't want to fire people because they don't want to get shorthanded again, like they got caught in the post-pandemic period. So they're afraid to fire. They can afford to keep people on just either by cutting their hours or by, in real terms, they're just not paying them as much. I mean, like, their wages, nominally, they're paying them the same or more, but that money simply doesn't go as far, so they're able to hold on to more employees. So the question is, does that continue, or do eventually these companies have to start shedding employees? And that's where I thought that the labor market would give out by now. Like I said, it does appear that the new hiring has finally stopped. They're not really hiring anymore. They're you wouldn't expect them to. I mean, they had to hire people obviously for the holidays. They're not going to fire a lot of people. They weren't going to fire a lot of people last month. They're not going to fire a lot of people this month because they still have the post-holiday stuff. But I think, by February, in the 2008 recession began in December of 2007. The job losses didn't start until March. I can see a situation like that. I think the job losses could begin as early as March. I'm not certain because this has been a strange cycle, but I think it's possible. But that's what you should like. So while I'm still not really convinced on the timing, like right now, like one possibility is that we're in a recession now already. The other is that we'll be in a recession within the next few months. I think those are the only two possibilities. Either we're in a recession that started sometime in December, or we will be in a recession either in January, February, or March. April at the absolute latest. That would mean that job losses should begin by July at the absolute latest. Now, I know everything's taken longer than I said it would. I've been wrong about the speed of these things, over and over and over again. But hopefully, I learn from my mistakes, and I think that I feel pretty confident about these numbers. That job losses, I think July at the latest. It really depends on. I'll have a better idea, depending on when the recession starts, because it's like after the recession starts, it could take months before job losses start. The early 70s recession, job losses didn't begin until 9 months after the recession started. That was a very inflationary recession, and the inflation seems mostly resolved now, so I don't think that's going to happen here. But no, I wouldn't be shocked if they end up backdating the recession all the way to October. I don't expect it, but it's possible. I don't think they're going to backdate it to December. I don't think they're going to say it started in January. I think what will probably happen is they'll say the recession started in February, or the recession will officially start in February. Job losses will start in June or July, and there will be at the time, even in if job losses start in July, August, whatever, I expect to hear more debate, like where you're going to have some people saying, like, are we going into a recession or not? They're still not going to be saying we're actually in a recession. No, there'll be some people saying, no, we're already in a recession, but most people will just be asking, are we going to go into a recession or not? Then I expect some type of financial crisis and a stock market crash. Maybe not a financial crisis. That's possible. It's tough to tell. It could happen. In fact, you know what? Scratch the financial crisis prediction, because I just don't know. There's a very good chance, but I'm not certain that there will be a financial crisis. I am, not certain, like I am about the overall economy and recession. I strongly believe there will be a stock market crash in September or October. I think it will be very bad. When it happens, that's when I expect there to be universal acknowledgement that we're already in recession. But ultimately, the recession I expect to be backdated to the early part of this year. Probably what you'll see is in 2025, the BLS will say something like recession began in, March of 2024, something like that. So, I would just say, hang in there, stick with it. I didn't expect things to take this long. I just, this is a very unusual recession because it comes from the massive credit expansion that you had, post-COVID, and we were just kind of in uncharted waters. So a lot of the indicators, while they were right about predicting a recession, or I believe they will be proven right about predicting recession, they were just premature with it. They were just premature because there was just it was just so weird. There was just so much liquidity in the system, so much credit in the system, and things just took a lot longer than we would have expected based on historical recessions. And that's just how it goes sometimes. That's all for now, and I'll see you in the next.